has been a long time since I have done an every clone ever. Quite frankly, the reason why it has been so long is because I feel like I've kind of exhausted them. There's a few little ones here and there I haven't done, this, that, and the other, but I just haven't felt like it. But this one, I feel like, was something I had to do. With the new Andor clone trooper that just came out, we had to go back and look at every single plain white Phase 2 clone trooper that has ever been made by Hasbro in the 3 3/4 inch scale. I'm pretty sure I've got them all. I'm pretty sure I do. I don't think I'm missing any little variations, this, that, or the other. If I am, I'm not missing any molds. How about that? I'm not missing any of the molds. We have pretty much all of the main Clone Trooper body molds that we have seen in a long time. We also have kind of a bonus one I wanted to throw in, mostly because it's one I really personally like. But yeah, we've gotten quite a few throughout the years. I think one of the first ones was this one back around 2004, and now, geez, nearly 20 years later, we have the latest one based on Andor, because Phase 1 or Phase 2 plain troopers showed up in Andor. I love the classic plain Phase 2 clone. However, I will admit, when it comes to plain white troopers, I prefer them in Phase 1. I feel like when I think of plain white clone troopers, I think of Phase 1. And then with Phase 2, by then the Republic has rolled out Legion colors. So, 212th orange, 501st blue, Shock Trooper red. I'm just so used to seeing the Phase 2 helmet and the whole thing in color. So seeing them plain white, you do see them, very briefly in the movie. You see them like on ships, you see them in gunships. They're just kind of backgrounders. They're not really in the forefront ever in the plain white armor. In Andor, obviously, they make a little appearance. They have appeared in the Clone Wars, obviously. We have a representation of that. They appeared in the old Clone Wars. But the plain white Phase 2 hasn't appeared in much. However, he does have plenty of toys. And let's just get into it. So one of the very first ones was this one, the Tartakovsky one. It's kind of surprising that I almost forgot about this guy, because the Tartakovsky series is my favorite aspect of Star Wars ever. I love it. And this figure is literally just the Phase 1 figure with a Phase 2 helmet tacked onto it, but it's still pretty nice. These are definitely made more just to represent the art style instead of being action figures. We can still have them point the gun and shoot, but they just look kind of awkward while they're doing it. Yeah, it's a fun little figure. If you like the Phase 2, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's one of the very first toys of the Phase 2 ever made. And I actually really, I like it. Next up, let's get all three of these out of the way now. These are the pre-posed troopers. These were pretty much just available in an army builder pack where you could just build the army and, they're pre-posed. And, you got one that's kneeling. This is a kneely boy. He's kneeling. He's got very limited articulation. The helmet's very basically painted as well. Honestly, one of the weirdest looking helmets out of all these, but surprisingly somehow not the weirdest. Yeah, we'll get to that. He does have like shoulder articulation. You can rotate the waist. These are really meant to just bolster your army, to just have troopers in a big battlefield display that are shooting, that are kneeling, that are laying down. That is the purpose of these packs. They were very affordable at the time, and nowadays they usually still are. Sometimes they cost a little bit depending on where you're buying them from, but I know I've ended up with plenty of these little pre-posed guys. They're there, they're pre-posed, they're good for big battle scenes, but if you're doing like an army lineup of clones, they're very awkward, and they're definitely not meant for a lineup like that. They're just meant for cool, fun action, I guess. I'm just going to say it. They nailed it right out the gate. Right out the gate in Revenge of the Sith. The superposable antenna mold Phase 2 clone trooper, they nailed it right out the gate. The original Revenge of the Sith version has all these weird little squiggly weathering marks. Some of them are brighter, some of them are darker, depending on like the run, I guess. But yeah, he's just got all these little squigglies on him. I guess it just weathers him up a little bit. And honestly, I've talked about this mold so many times. If you're a Clone Trooper fan, you know what's up with it. It is still to this day probably the best Clone Trooper body mold. It's just so well done. Like, it feels so solid as a toy. Unfortunately, because it is made out of harder plastic in the torso, this mold is prone to some discoloration. You can see this one's a little discolored, but not horribly so. I do have some that are horribly so. I have plenty. Probably the only part of this figure that really needs an actual articulation update are the hips, because the armor there's just no space in there for the legs to move forward. So, like, without straining the plastic, that's all you can move the legs forward. But, of course, you know, when we were kids, we were like, yeah, let's get the leg forward. And after you move the leg forward, you can see it's kind of stretched out a little bit. But it goes back after a while. It goes back. The articulation's superb. The antenna's optional, too, if you don't want it there, because not every trooper had an antenna. But some in Revenge of the Sith actually do. It's just so good. It's so good. I really do love it. Honestly, if it was just this figure with, you know, maybe some modern little tweaks, I think it would be great. The helmet, honestly, it's not the best helmet here, in my opinion. It's the second best, but it's still very, very nicely done. They got it right out the gate, man. And it's a shame that we're kind of struggling with the latest one. If you know, you know. Next up, this is the most underrated clone trooper mold, in my opinion, the Quick Draw. You squeeze his legs, and he draws the gun. It's so fun. This, actually, is the one I consider to have the best helmet mold. I think the Quick Draw clone has the best helmet. It just looks so much like how he does in the movie. Like, that is the Phase 2 helmet. That looks almost perfect. It's not perfect. If you want perfect, go to Hot Toys. But if you're just looking for one that looks really, really, like, accurate in this scale, I think this is the best helmet. And we'll kind of do some mixing and matching near the end, but this guy's great. He does have a gimmick where you can swap the shoulder pad, and the alternate one has an Imperial logo. You know what Imperial logos look like. I wasn't going to dig one out just to do that. You know what they look like. The articulation's really good on this one, too. It doesn't have anything in the torso for the gimmick, obviously. But still, you actually have more range at the hips, which is really great. You can move him around. He's got hinges. It's almost exactly the same articulation-wise from the antenna one. It just doesn't have a torso for the Quick Draw. This mold did actually see re-release all the way in like 2012 for Movie Heroes, and I think it's a great mold worthy of a re-release. I really do enjoy this one. Okay, this one's a bonus. This technically is not just a normal Phase 2 clone trooper. This is the ATTE Gunner with all of the armor removed. And the reason I have this here is because I just want to talk about it because it's one of my favorite clone molds. It's not the greatest, obviously. He only has swivels at the shoulders and swivels at the elbows. So that immediately is going to make him pretty weird compared to a lot of others. But he was one of the very first clones with ball hinges at the hips. Check that out. So his leg articulation was insane. It's so easy to get him kneeling. He's got really nice ankle joints. Honestly, except for the limited articulation, you know, in the torso and the arms, this guy is almost perfect. This is actually one of the first clones that we got with a removable helmet, so that is something to note. And that is still one of the best Morrison likenesses to this day. I really do enjoy it. This also did have a removable shoulder pad gimmick, but instead of like a swappable one, it just exposes the logo underneath. I really do love this one, but again, I do need to preface, this is the ATTE Gunner with the armor removed. This is not an actual Phase 2 clone that is offered, but hey, all you have to do is remove the armor, and there you have a very nice Phase 2. I love the helmet, actually. I think out of all the removable helmets, this is probably the best one. Again, they nailed it back in 2005. Back in 2005, we got this deluxe boy. He's technically, again, kind of cheating because he's not a plain white trooper. Oh, look, he is now. Isn't that great? Yeah, he's got this cool rifle. He's got this jetpack. He's actually based off of concept art for jet troopers, where they had these cool backpacks and they had missiles that shot out. It's a really nice mold. This mold, you might know it better as the Coruscant landing platform mold in that big battle pack with the blue Commander Bakara. This one's got some pretty decent articulation, but again, it is kind of limited up, you know, at the torso. Like, he just has swivels at the shoulders. I don't even know if he has swivels at the elbows. I don't remember. I don't think he does, actually. It's pretty much just made to hold the rifle. And honestly, for an action figure, it works. This one does have this weird thing, though, where the line in the front kind of meets in the middle, and it leaves this little mark. Some antenna molds have it, but I notice it almost all the time on this version. Kind of odd, but, you know, it's still a cool one. So there is a plain white version of the antenna mold as well. This guy actually saw a lot of re-releases, like in Saga Legends and all that. So this is a clone that was pretty widely available. I really love Saga Legends, man. It was a great line where they just re-released evergreen characters: Anakin, Vader, Clone Troopers, Boba Fett. It's like if you want a character on the shelf all the time, Saga Legends had you covered. Nowadays, good luck finding any Clone Trooper stuff in the action figure aisle. Hasbro's just so out of touch with it. They really are. Again, antenna mold, really great. Removable antenna, really great helmet. Really do enjoy it. Honestly, if you want to army build realistic Phase 2 clones, I think this one right here is probably the best one you could go for. In my opinion, I would say go for this one. Next up, we have the Vintage Collection Phase 2 Clone Trooper. This guy actually had a variant where one didn't have a brow stripe, funny enough, like a lot of Clone Wars style things that Hasbro likes to do nowadays. He did not have a brow stripe, and this one does have a brow stripe. So personally, I prefer the brow stripe one. It's just more accurate. But yeah, this is the Revenge of the Sith, Vintage Collection one that we got all the way at the start of the line. This mold, this body mold, is pretty nicely articulated. It's based off the Gela Grub 327th Trooper. So it does have like ball hinges at the hips. It's got some nice knee articulation. I knew that was going to happen. I knew they were going to fall. It's been so long since I've done a clone video. And I'm like, if they don't fall, I'm going to be shocked. But of course they had to fall. Of course they had to. Well, anyways, articulation's really nice on this one. Oddly enough, it is kind of oddly shaped in the crotch region. It has like this weird shape that normally Clone Troopers don't have, where it has like this extra line. It's kind of odd, but honestly, I personally don't mind this body. It's a shame they got rid of it pretty quick. You can remove the head, or you can remove the helmet, and it has the same head sculpt that we've seen for a little bit since the tank gunner mold. It's a pretty nice head sculpt, pretty cool. I like this guy, man. I really do like these clones. Would I recommend army building this mold? Maybe not army building it. It's kind of scarce. You don't really see this one around too often. I wouldn't really get this one without the brow stripe. But it's kind of scarce. Yeah, I just go antenna, man. Speaking of scarce, here is one of the most expensive Clone Troopers that is on the market nowadays. This is definitely the most expensive on this list. This is the Clone Wars Dave Filoni style Phase 1 or Phase 2 Clone Trooper, plain white. This guy is not easy to get. A lot of people really wanted to army build it, and that resulted in an absolute drought in the market. A lot of people also got them to customize. So that also resulted in a big drought in the market. So the market's very dry, and whichever ones do show up, they are nearing, if not over, $100 already. I'm lucky. I have a decent amount of this guy. I've got like 3 or 4. But, man, I've painted up a few myself because it's so hard to resist. Hasbro never did a 501st. They never did a 212th. They never did a shock trooper out of this mold. So it's kind of funny. One of the rare instances where it was just the plain white, and you didn't get any of the other colors out of this mold. It's a great one though. I really do recommend it if you can get it. But if you can't get it, honestly, don't beat yourself up too much. Nowadays, with 3 3/4 inch collecting, the main priority is going to be the realistic style. So I would stick with more realistic style ones instead of, I need this to repaint in a Jesse and hard case and blah, 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 blah. Just grab tons of antenna molds, man. That's what I suggest. This is perhaps one of the most obscure ones on this list. This guy was only included with a Bark Speeder. It was a Bark Speeder set where you got a plain Phase 2 Clone Trooper. And it's the one with the weird face underneath, and it's the Phase 2 helmet. It's pretty much the Phase 1, but with, the Phase 2 helmet. Definitely obscure. Not easy to get either. Like I said, it just came as a vehicle pack-in. It's kind of rare that you get a plain white clone as a vehicle pack-in, but this is, one of them. He doesn't have the right gun. Clone guns are clone guns, man. I'm not going to try to worry about matching up all the guns exactly. As long as animated guns are with animated and the realistic are with the realistic, I'm not worried about clone guns. They all go in the same baggie at the end of the day. So don't worry about guns. I've just got the figures here. I do prefer these older, more robust DC-15 rifles, though. I'm not going to lie. I do prefer these, even though the thinner ones are more accurate to what you actually see on screen. Yeah, this is the Vintage Collection mold we've known for years and years, and it's, very scrawny, very, very thin, and the helmet is absolutely huge. But at least the helmet is properly painted. Yeah, That leads us to our latest and unfortunately not greatest Phase 2 clone trooper, the Andor mold. It is pretty much the greatest from the neck down, but you really, really fall short with that face, man. That is just, that helmet's just not good. It's not good. Now, granted, if it's more properly painted, which some samples thankfully are, it does look better. But let me just bring in the one I consider the best and compare it to this. Look at that, man. Something's not going on. Something's not right. That is just, what is going on with that? That's just not right. However, the body itself is very nice. I did do a whole video on this guy if you want to check it out, but getting that gun out. This is one of the first 3 3/4 inch clones with a separate shoulder pad, kind of similar to Black Series. It is very similar to a shrunken down Black Series, but it's not exact. It does have some differences in the mold, like being an Andor trooper. It does have the, it's so funny, going back to the antenna mold where there's no space. The Andor costume designers made sure there was space so legs could actually move in physical armor instead of being a CGI model. It does have ball joints at the hips. This is one of the first clone troopers with a ball-jointed hip system instead of ball hinges or swivels. The articulation's really nice, man, but it just falls really short at that helmet. Now, granted, underneath that helmet, oh, wow, that is Tamora Morrison. That is a great job. That is him right there. That's him. That's him. That is so nicely done. But once you put that helmet on, man, it sits super low. Like, look at that. He doesn't have a neck. There is a way to kind of remedy that. You pop the head off, then you kind of don't put it on all the way, but you just put it on a little bit. Then you put the helmet on, and it gives him a neck. You do have a solution to it, but it's such a shame. After nearly 20 years, they can't get the helmet right. They can't get the helmet right. So one thing I do want to do, I do want to try on different helmets, and I want to see how this can play out with kind of making a definitive trooper. So obviously there's no rig for this helmet to actually be attached. I don't have a neck, but here is the quick draw helmet, which I consider to be one of, if not the best, 3 3/4 inch Phase 2 clone helmet. And you can see that looks pretty good. Obviously no neck, but if you get that situated, I feel like proportionally it is a little different. Since this is based on an actual costume, I feel like it's more barrel-chested. So maybe a slightly different helmet would look a little better. Obviously, the white's a little off because this figure's nearly 20 years old. But yeah, I think that works pretty well. What else can we do? Let me get this back on. I want to try my favorite removable helmet on this. I want to try this gunner helmet. That actually looks pretty good. I'm not going to lie. That looks pretty good. Obviously, again, the whites are ever so slightly off, but that's not bad, man. That is not bad. And I mean, come on, just look at that. This guy has the visor is literally a line. There's no definition to that visor. And the mouth is way too thick. I think this helmet's really nice. And it does fit over the new Tamora Morrison head sculpt as well, which I do want to show off for reference. It's kind of cool, over the years. That one still actually looks pretty decent, but the new one is so much cooler. This is such a nice head sculpt. So, honestly, in my opinion, this is a pretty definitive Phase 2 with this helmet. That looks pretty nice. But you can tell, the paint's kind of fuzzy on this one, oddly enough. So it doesn't work perfect, but it's an option. I do want to try this vintage collection. The first vintage collection, Phase 1 helmet, or Phase 2 helmet. I don't know, I'm mixing up the number there. That doesn't look bad. It is a little large, obviously. That is one thing that Hasbro wanted to remedy. They didn't want the massive helmets anymore. So you can see the new one's a little smaller. But still, that doesn't look bad. Let's see if I can do like the under chin thing that I've done with some of them. Yeah, that's not bad. Here, I just undid it. It's definitely an improvement, that I can say. This is an improvement to this. A little large, but the print is so much better. Man, I hope they revise that helmet or at least try to figure out the print. I'm sure they've gotten a lot of complaints about it. I do also want to try this helmet with like the newer mold. Ugh, I don't like that. Something about this newer style helmet. I'm not a fan of it. The helmet with like the spindly, the scrawny mold. Because it's funny, the head is so tiny too. That's not even based off Tamora Morrison. That's not even Tamora Morrison. So it's such a tiny head that it just doesn't work, man. It doesn't work. So I've done some swap-me-doos. I've done some swippy swaps. One thing for fun. I'm curious. How does... Oh, this is going to be weird. How does it look with the old animated helmet? Oh, that's perfect. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, let's stop. So there we go. There is a very long comparison between all of the Phase 2 clones that Hasbro has ever made in 3 3/4 inch. Will this be the last Clone Trooper mold in 3 3/4 inch? Maybe. Honestly, it might be. I think it has the potential to be. I don't really see why they need to make a new mold after this. They need to make a new helmet. That is my only point of contention. You can see the height of the Andor one is actually pretty comparable to a lot of others. It's not that short, which is pretty good because a lot of newer clones are short. So you can see, thankfully, his height's pretty good. It's kind of crazy seeing how all these clone figures have changed throughout all these different years. Going all the way back to like 2004, 2005. Some of you guys weren't even alive when these things were coming out. I love it, though. I love that there's, so many new young fans getting into it. It's what keeps it alive, a new generation's what keeps it alive. So I love these figures. My personal favorite out of all of them, man, I want to say the antenna, but I don't know. I really do like the quick draw. I really do like the armorless gunner, and I really do like the Phase 2 Clone Wars animated style. The Andor one, it's objectively probably one of the best, but it does fall flat in a lot of ways. Kind of like this guy. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about this Clone Trooper evolution, this every ever? It's actually both, so that's kind of interesting. Typically it's one or the other, but this video is both. Let me know what you think. I'm pretty happy I finally was able to do this. I was waiting to get that Andor Trooper to make this video, and I'm happy I waited, because now I feel like we have a really comprehensive look at all of these different Clone Troopers. I'm not really one to talk about Clone Troopers much nowadays. I do want to say I enjoy Clone Troopers still. I love them, but especially with the 3 3/4 inch ones. I feel like this was one of the last 3 3/4 inch Clone Trooper videos I needed to make. There's still a few clones, like a cherry picking here and there that I've not done videos on. There's so few, but I've almost talked about all of them. So forgive me if I, don't really go back into old 3 3/4 inch clones nowadays. I don't really have too much to add. I really don't. I might do something at some point, but I'm kind of going away from doing a lot of old retrospective 3 3/4 inch clone videos. Clone Corner has gone on for so long, over 100 episodes. It's not ending. But it's definitely going to slow down, especially with the old 3 3/4 inch Clone Troopers. Because I'm looking at my shelves right now. I'm not really seeing many that I haven't already talked about. Genuinely. Like, every once in a while, there's like, oh, I haven't talked about that named character or that one, but I've almost talked about all of them, man. I've almost talked about them all. So, we'll see. We'll see, maybe I'll do a Clones Miss again and, talk about ones here and there that are like one-offs I haven't talked about. But seriously, go back, watch old Clone Corner videos, man. I've talked about almost all of it. This was one of the biggest ones I hadn't done yet, and I finally did it. So, here we go. Every Phase 2 Clone Trooper in 3 3/4 inch. There's Black Series ones. I just got the Hot Toys one a few months ago, and I adore it. That's my favorite. There we go. That's my favorite plain Phase 2, the Hot Toys. Even though I displayed as the Phase 1. Man, I kind of wish I would have bought 2 of it. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about these down in the comments below. Now, which one's your favorite? Which is the one? Here's the question for the video. I want to start doing this. I'm struggling to keep it consistent, but I want to start doing this. If you could army build one of these figures, which one would it be? If it's that one, good luck. If it's the antenna mold, that's a really great choice. Or if it's the new Andor one because of availability, let me know in the comments below. If you could only army build one of these, which one would it be? Alrighty, guys, thank you so much for watching. Special shout out to channel members, as always. Thank you all so much for the continued support. Alrighty, guys, have a great one. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.